All right, hey guys. So just a recap from week 8. So I went 4-1 yesterday, and so close. So those 5 games that I picked, put them together in a 5-team parlay. So close to cashing a 5-teamer or 5-gamer yesterday. So that's just the way it goes. So if I had my ticket here, so you could see. So I had, you can see there. So Minnesota obviously covered the +7 against Green Bay. Vegas covered against the Browns. Seattle covered, and Atlanta covered. The only one I got wrong was the New Orleans -4. So you can see there, $40 ticket. It's just in reverse here, but would have cashed for $800. So times 20 for a five gamer. That's the way it goes. But overall, great week. Not really any sweats either. I mean, Atlanta, they were a 3-point dog. They won outright. There were nothing really too crazy in that game. Carolina was never going to win that game. Vegas, they were an underdog at +2.5 and also won outright. That game was close. I watched a bit of it, but it was kind of a boring game. It was 6-6 for a while. I mean, the Browns, the same thing. They weren't really doing anything offensively. The Raiders did just enough, but not really a sweat there. The Raiders went outright. And then Seattle, again, not really a sweat. They were up 27-7 at one point. They were only a field goal favorite. So they ended up winning pretty comfortably. And then Minnesota as well. I mean, +7 again. I told you Green Bay was a trap. I mean, -6.5, the line opened up. It was trap written all over it. And Minnesota went outright. So anytime you pick a 7-point dog and they're up 2 touchdowns, late in the game, you're feeling pretty good. They ended up winning the game outright. So Minnesota was easy. Atlanta was easy. I mean, relatively speaking, right? No pick is really easy. But I mean, when I looked at the game, I'm like, the Green Bay one, it made no sense. Minnesota seemed easy to me. Vegas against Cleveland. I mean, Seattle against San Fran. Unfortunately, Jamal Adams wasn't able to come back into that game, which I thought would hurt Seattle. I wasn't liking that one all that much because that line dropped from -3 where I got them down to almost a pick 'em by game time. So I'm like, but San Fran has their own injuries, and they were banged up during that game with Garoppolo and Kittle going down. So yeah, I mean, I love that one. Atlanta, Julio Jones just lit Carolina up. I mean, the only one I got wrong was New Orleans -4 at Chicago. And they had a lot of injuries. New Orleans, they were missing their receiver core. Allen Robinson was able to come back for Chicago. This is typically why I don't like picking games as early as Thursday, because the injury report, right, you don't really know what's going to happen. But listen, New Orleans was the right side. I mean, cover or not, they won the game. I had them at -4. They won by 3, so I was like 1 point away from the very least a push, which would have paid $400. If they just would have got a couple more points, would have got $800. With the parlay, obviously, you get 0 if you get one wrong. So, yeah, tough beat there, but it was a great sweat because, I mean, the game went to overtime, right? So, I mean, it was a long day of football. And, again, that's all you can ask for. Getting your money in good, have a sweat. You don't want to be done by, 2:30 on a Sunday. You're like, geez, this ticket's dead. But New Orleans was the right side. I mean, I watched, like I said, that game mostly because the other games, like the Vegas and Minnesota game, were early, and then Seattle and New Orleans were my late games. But Seattle was, I mean, they were up double digits for the vast majority of that game, so I really wasn't watching that too much. So I was watching the New Orleans game. It was 13-3 Chicago. New Orleans gets a touchdown right before the half, so I'm like, okay, it's 13-10 at the half. They came out third quarter, and the Saints were, Chicago's offense looked terrible, and which they normally do, right? And New Orleans makes it 13-13. They get an interception, get another field goal, 16-13. They get the ball on their next possession, starting at midfield, and weren't able to score any points. They finally were able to get a touchdown to make it 23-13. So they were up 10 there with just about 4 or 5 minutes to go in the game. And the unfortunate thing is that once New Orleans is up 10, they're going to play more of a prevent D, right? Like Chicago's offense is obviously not good. And with time being on New Orleans' side, they're just going to play a prevent D, keep everything in front of them, make Chicago score twice against them, and just use up a lot of clock. And that's what they did. So the Bears, I mean, I I was sweating it because it was 3rd and long, and the Bears threw it in the end zone, and they got a PI call, and I was like, oh, God, now it's 1st and goal at the 1. And, if they make – and it was a good coverage on the 3rd down. He didn't turn his head. If he just would have turned his head, he was right there on Jimmy Graham. It would have been 4th down, and Chicago would have kicked the field goal. It was 4th and long. They would have just kicked it to get within 1 score and still would have covered. There's no way Chicago was going to score twice. Unfortunately, the penalty, they ended up getting a touchdown, and then New Orleans stripped. They got the fumble, but they then called forward progress, so then Chicago still had the ball, and they ended up sending it to overtime, which is, without getting a defensive touchdown for New Orleans, I was hoping that for that game to go to overtime just so New Orleans had a chance to score a touchdown. And they won the coin toss. I got the ball. I'm feeling great. I'm like, okay, just get a touchdown here, and I win, and they weren't able to get a touchdown. Both teams had a punt. Kamara had a nice long run at the end of overtime, got it to the 12-yard line, but I was like, Sean Payton, obviously his record speaks for himself, his resume speaks for himself, but this is the reason why New Orleans seems to run into themselves year in and year out, and it's been more, prevalent in the playoffs, and it's just Sean Payton's, a great offensive coach, but sometimes he just makes he overthinks it. Why? And obviously I'm biased here because I'm like, don't kick a field goal because I want to cover. But why are you kicking the field goal when it's first and 10? They got a delayed game penalty. So 1st and 15, they're at inside the 20-yard line for Chicago. Chicago has no timeouts left, and it's 1:40 left in overtime. Why don't you just run a couple of plays? At the very least, run on 1st and 2nd down, get a little bit closer. Maybe you score a touchdown and cover my ticket. But regardless, you still have a timeout. Chicago has no control of this game. It's 1:40 left. Just run it, crush the clock down, and then kick the chip shot field goal. If you miss, at least you get a tie. By him kicking it, and Will Lutz missed a field goal earlier in the game off the upright, which screwed the game up because if he would have gotten the field goal, it would have been 26-20, and we would have covered, and Chicago would have needed a touchdown on their last drive instead of a field goal to tie it. And you got to, anytime you are betting against the Bears of scoring a touchdown, you are feeling really good about yourself, right? And Lutz missed the field goal, and that ended up costing us the cover and the ticket. But why, I don't understand why New Orleans doesn't just run a couple of plays there. Kill the clock, you kick it for the last play of the game, you score, you make it, you win, you miss, it's a tie. If he misses that field goal with 1:40 left, Chicago, even without any timeouts, has now plenty of time to just go down the field and get a field goal. Mind you, their offense is putrid. But, at the same time, you do run the risk of, we've seen crazy things of Nick Foles. You never count him out. I just didn't get why they kicked it with so much time left. And the fact that he already missed a field goal early and it was windy conditions in Chicago, I didn't get it. But whatever. At the end of the day, Lutz missed the field goal earlier in the game that cost us the cover. Drew Brees can't throw the ball over 10 yards these days. So I know he didn't have a lot of his receivers, but it was rough watching him pass. He can't pass. Everything is checked down to Kamara. But, having said that, how bad is Chicago? This is a fade team. We were on the right side in that game. There's no way Chicago was going to win that game. They had Allen Robinson back. The Saints were decimated with injuries on offense, and they still won. Chicago, literally the Bears have as their probability of making it to the Super Bowl is the same as the New York Jets. 0. None. Chicago will never make it to the Super Bowl because it's not 2006 anymore. And, you need an offense. And how is Chicago going to keep up with anybody? They have no offense. Nick Foles is not the answer. 3 years ago, Philly, he had a defense like he has now in Chicago, but he had a much more balanced offense. The Bears are no threat on offense, and thus will never make it to the Super Bowl. Enough of a Bears rant. I'm just saying, as a Bears fan, and as a player on the Bears, what you got. It's demoralizing. Allen Robinson had to go off on his own during that game and just not be part of that offense because he had to cool down. Because he's got to think we have no shot. In today's NFL, we can't move the chains. We have no shot. The defense is when you're still relying on your defense and special teams to win you games in 2020, there's a problem with that team and the way they're built, right? And they're still feeling the hangover effects from the blown draft in 2017 when they drafted Trubisky over Watson and Mahomes. But they're just, the woes continue in Chicago, of how, abysmal they are on the offensive side of the ball. Having said that, it was a great week. We are 4-1. You're that close to cashing a massive 5-game parlay Hopefully I attracted some of your guys' attention. I mean, we were on the right side. There was no sweats, and you're not going to have that every single week. But we were on the right side of all those. I look at these games, I'm like, Green Bay was a sucker bet, so Minnesota was a great bet there. Vegas was a great bet. Seattle, San Fran didn't show up. It was a great spot for Seattle coming off a loss last week, and San Fran coming off a win. In Atlanta, good spot for them. Short week. They had another tough loss last week against the Lions. They came back and win. New Orleans was the right side. Just didn't happen, but great week. Let's keep it rolling. I'm on fire right now. Let's keep it going into week 9. Guys, like, subscribe so you actually see these videos on a regular basis. Week 9's coming later in this week. I got to look at the lines more closely the next few days, and we'll have another solid week next week.